Hello, my name is Edward Haletky. I'm with the virtualization practice. I'm a virtualization security analyst, and I've been doing VMware vExperts since the beginning. Today I want to talk about using VMware vCNS with Horizon View. The interesting thing about Horizon View is most people don't use it with a firewall, and the vast majority of people I talk to don't even use it with a security server. They just set up the connection broker and go from there. There are better ways. Now, there are two ways to use Horizon. One is to use it as an inside-out, which means you're coming from the inside and going out to the internet. Or the way I use it, which is outside-in. I actually use it as a road warrior. I come from the outside, go into my environment, and I actually access my View desktops from there. And since I'm coming from a conference, and sometimes security conferences, I kind of really want as much security as I can get. So what I've done here is this is the endpoint of where I want to go. I normally launch from my iPad, and I'm trying to make sure this little thing works. It doesn't, so let's see if we can use the cursor. Here we go. I start with my iPad. I go through my physical switches to my network. I hit my vCNS DMZ. It's an edge there. I'm going into my DMZ, which I have the View security server. And then I go into another edge, which leads me to my internal network and my connection broker and eventually my desktop, and that all gets shipped back out to my iPad. So I'm actually going to be setting up two edges. In the first edge, what I want to do is set up some basic firewall rules. And actually, VMware's done a great job of making this easy. You have a view, the main one, whoops, sorry, go back there. The main one here is the View one. You want to set it up. They actually have it for VMware View 5.x IP, PC over IP. You also need HTTP and HTTPS. That's it. Now I added DNS so I can go out and actually resolve things. And I added ICMP because I want to be able to ping into my security server to say, are you alive? Are you alive? Mainly because if I can't reach it, I can't reach my network. And I accept all those, and I allow them to come from any address. The last one is a default rule that says deny. Now I log all this. Everything here is going to a log server, which I'll bring up in a different talk. But the key is that you actually use just a simple set of rules. Now, it used to be a lot harder. And when vCNS came out first, when it was still vShield, this would have been something like 40 different rules. VMware took some advice and kept it as simple as possible. But I also need to set up some other things. I want what's in my DMZ to be a NAT, because a NAT adds a little bit extra protection. And you notice there's some blank things because I actually don't want to give you my internal information. So I look up a source NAT, external, basically to internal. So I'm basically going from one side to the other side. I have a vCNS edge, there are two sides. You got your external, you got your internal of your edge. So you want to NAT everything in here to the external IP of your vCNS edge. And then I set up some destination NATs. If you look at destination NATs, they're basically taking everything for PC over IP and HTTP and HTTPS and saying, go to my security server. Don't go anywhere else, but go to my security server. The reason being is you want everything to go through the security server. The security server is going to actually then contact the connection broker over all those ports and then do the right thing to connect up your desktop. If you just say generically, just let these in, they don't know where to go. So I'm actually doing some port redirections. So I finally get to my edge. So my traffic is coming in on port 443, usually, going through to my security server. My security server now sends port 443 over to the connection broker to say, hey, I need a desktop. But I need one more thing on my edge. And that is basically I need to configure a static route. Basically, I need to go from my internal network, where my next hop is, which is on my DMZ, to my vCNS View edge. That's the interface I'll be using. Without the static network, the static route, things won't actually go in. They'll just kind of die and try to go back out the default route, which is outside. If you look at my default, is an external IP address. So I want one to push things further in. Okay? So next, I have my vCNS view edge. Now this is the interesting part. I wish it was up here. Is that I actually am going to configure this very simply as well. The simpler your firewall rules, the better off you are. If you have thousands of them, you can't audit them quickly. You can't make easy changes. I personally wouldn't be able to understand it. So I actually set up firewalls for very specific use cases. This one is purely for view. I have other ones for SSH. I have other ones for various other IP ports that I need coming in. Internally, I try to set up simple firewall rules as well. I know companies that have huge numbers. That's up to them. I don't personally like that. So again, I'm setting up ICMP so I can ping from one to the other. I want to be able to say from the connection broker, is the security server alive? From the security server, I want to say, is the connection broker alive? Sometimes you have to test both sides of this. But there's a whole lot of ports that need to be open for view. And again, it's an any to any. I could actually put the source of some of these in the destination to be the various different connection broker and security server. But since I only have one VM in my DMZ, I don't need to really worry about that. Again, HTTP, HTTPS. Then you got these weird ones, AGP13, and the View 5 JMS, RDP, PC over IP, and some internet applications, and MMR. These are actually all available when you select View 5 from inside of the configuration manager for vCNS. The main thing is if there's a wonderful document that's been put out on the web about all the different ports and how View works, definitely go to that. And I can get a link to that later. I should have put it on the slide, my apologies. There's actually two people that have them. Julian Wood has Wood at Work. He has a great one, and a few others. This is actually taken purely from experimentation. Some things worked, some things didn't, so I picked the ones that did. I picked all the View ones, and then said, oh, it actually requires RDP sometimes, so I may want to RDP. Now, why would I want to RDP? Is that because I actually may want to test to make sure that connection works. From my iPad, I'm only using PC over IP. So the security server comes in, it's only PC over IP. If you're really concerned about that, you can take that off. That's easy. The rest of them you absolutely need. And they're going over the various ports that you have for it. Now, you notice this one has actually been modified. I have some other information in here I didn't want to show on this particular slide deck because it's actually solving a different problem. But this is interesting is that everything here I log to my log insight. So I know anytime View comes in, and I got some special dashboards in log insight that says, hey, View's being used. Was it supposed to be? Well, since I'm really the only one using it, and my other analysts the only ones using it, I know who should be using it, right? Which means I can figure out who should not be there and who should be, which is kind of cool. But when I go through, I'm now going to my internal switch. And I want a NAT again. And the reason being is my internal IP address definitely won't match anything in my DMZ, and I need to map the two. That's all I'm doing here. But I only have a source NAT. I don't need anything else. I don't need a destination NAT here. It knows to talk to the connection broker because the security server and the connection broker hook up when you install View. It's kind of cool. And eventually I get to my desktops. Now this is actually very nice. I could demonstrate this all to you, which I won't because I don't have it all plugged in. They get upset with me. But the one thing you got to be aware of, I'm using an iPad. Let's talk a little bit about iPad security. The iPad is really easy. I can actually use my iPhone too, which is kind of fun. Have you ever tried using View on an iPhone? Anybody? You do this a lot. Where's that menu? I do that a lot. But one of the things is I'm using the same technique to get in. I'm splitting up my network, putting in a security server, having multiple edges, one for my DMZ, one for the internal. configuring them as simply as possible and going from there. But it doesn't know which device I'm using. So I have to apply some operational security as well. If I'm using an iPad, I have a keyboard with mine. Let me show you. Nice Bluetooth keyboard, right? When you're talking about using an iPad, specifically for this, is a very important lesson to learn. When you connect, always view the certificate. Why always view the certificate? You're going to be looking at this nice little code that came from your security server for the fingerprint, and you're going to be saying, is that the one that I had before? That's how the man in the middle is done. Don't check parts of that. Don't check the first 3 digits. Check something in here. Remember 3 of them, 3 of the octets, and go from there. I start somewhere, and you just pick those 3 all the time. Eventually, you expand to 4 and 5 and 6. Check as many as you can. Say, oh, the ones I know that should be there. So I'm going to go ahead and say accept. What's the next thing that pops up? Password. Where am I going to type that password? Anybody? Right on the keyboard? On the screen, yes. Why? That's a Bluetooth keyboard, and anybody in this room can pick up my password easily. So I bring up the keyboard and type my password. Now it's all contained on the glass. That's operational security. And by the way, before I do that, I always look around. It's kind of important. I just want to know who's looking over my shoulder. It's an iPad. It's easy to sniff everything. But I'm going from my iPad to the switch, to a physical NIC, to a virtual switch, to my vCNS edge, to another virtual switch that contains the port group for the front end and the port group for the back end. They are different. And then through my security server to my next vCNS edge, which is internal. You can tell I've done red is bad, orange is getting there, my DMZ, green is where I think it's safe. And then from there, I'm going to my internal port group, which is on a different vSwitch than everything else. I separate by vSwitch. Some people do it by port group. And actually, I use different vSwitch constructs for all of these. My DMZ is on one VDS, because vCNS Edge works best with VDSs. My internal could be a Nexus 1000V. It could be a virtual switch, a VSS, or it could be another VDS. And the reason why you want these split is because they have different control planes. So if I break into one, I may not be able to get to the other ones, at least through my networking layers. The other attack points on the network still work, but the control planes are totally different. And you can actually build up a fairly good secure view environment. Some other additional thoughts that I'm going to think about when I'm inside of my environment finally is vCNS app. I want to do microsegmentation. I could use NSS NetX, right? Everybody's talking about that, but vCNS app is something I can set up to say, hey, this VM is allowed to go to these management constructs, and this one, sorry, you can only go to these workspaces. That's it. You can't go any further into my network, and view sessions can't talk to other view sessions, which is really important, because if one gets broken into, you don't suffer the whole thing getting broken into. Again, the NSX micro segmentation, and again, using login site. Every one of my edges logs to login site, or Splunk. Pick your favorite SEIM, whichever one. Log it, monitor it, make sure it's the traffic you should expect. You got to do some operational stuff while you're traveling. You need to do some operational work while you're actually inside of the environment. Since we're at the end of this, where to go for more information, I write about some of this on the virtualization practice. I've actually written a book. It's an older book, published in 2009, but to be honest, the concepts still apply today. If you really want, I was going to update this book. I've thought about it. And to do a modern version of this book, I take VMsafe Net and substitute NetX. That's about it. Everything else is the same. It hasn't changed. Virtualization security is still virtualization security. The concept still is the same. And the Virtualization Security Podcast, we have vendors on, we have other guests, we have had just about everybody in the security field come on, so please join us. Thank you.